Hello, and welcome to the We Are Power podcast. This is the podcast that we put out every single week, and I have the gift to be able to speak to some of the most phenomenal role models from all sectors, all walks of life, all with that interesting path, interesting adventure that they've taken. Nobody ever follows one straight path. And this week I am so very excited because I literally feel like I've met my match in collecting role models, met my match in being totally motivated by storytelling, and the wonder that is gender equality and everything that goes in its form. So I am delighted to welcome from Boston, Jamie Mittelman. Now, Jamie began managing a $30 million, shall I say? Sorry, wrong. 30 million. This is going to happen again, isn't it? Media portfolio for giants like Yahoo, the Huffington Post and AOL. She has a passion for sports and inclusion beyond anything that could ever be written down, which led her to create the Flamebearers, which I'm really excited we're going to talk about. And the first storytelling platform, which is dedicated to the celebrating of stories of women Olympians and Paralympians. I cannot wait for this conversation. Jamie, welcome so much to the pod.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here.
Oh, and how did it start? Because one of the articles I heard from you is you wanted to play soccer, or as we would say over here, football, right? We wanted to play soccer for the USA. But how did you go from that to managing this $30 million portfolio?
Sure.
Tell me that one.
So when I was a little girl, I grew up idolizing the U.S. women's national soccer team, which had a phenomenal track record. They were the role models who I aspired to be. When I went off to college, I quickly learned that I was not going to be that person. I was not skilled enough in soccer. But I decided that I wanted to dedicate my career to working with women and girls. About the first decade of my career was trying to figure out how I wanted to work with women and girls. I at first thought I was going to be a teacher. I quickly realized that that was not for me, though I loved working with students. I wanted to reach more than the 15 students in my classroom. And that's where I fell into the role of marketing and communications, and specifically the power of media to impact people and shape lives. So often in the world today, we hear about media being used for ill will, people using media to warp people's perceptions. But I really got into it because I think it can be an incredible educational resource and a tool to really empower people and to open people's minds. So that's why I got into media and communications. And then I was receiving a master's degree at the time, had kind of hilariously stumbled upon this. This was supposed to be my internship. I was getting a master's in policy at the Harvard Kennedy School, had been pitching a role to the International Olympic Committee around their gender equity work. And then COVID happened and no one knew what was up or down. The games were postponed for a year. And I said, well, I'm not just going to sit here twiddling my thumbs, not knowing what's going to happen. I'm going to do this on my own. And this was 4 years ago. We are now in, I think it's 50 countries. We've worked with over 130 Olympians and Paralympians from around the world. And we tell stories via podcast, video, and live events. So wow. The rest is history. It's kind of crazy.
But I read, I watched something you talked about, which was this was the savior of your pandemic, a lockdown, because you, like me, have this addiction to phenomenal role models, right?
100%. So I'll give you the professional story, and then I'll also give you the personal, real, what actually happened. Professionally, absolutely. They are what got me up in the morning. They were kind of my why. I think in certain ways this work, and I didn't realize it at the time, kind of became my own personal rescue mission. I had just lost my dad to brain cancer, and I almost lost my mom in the same year. And I think I was really looking for role models who I could look up to. I was looking for role models of resilience and grit, women who had been through really hard stuff and picked themselves back up again, because my light was starting to be extinguished. And I think personally, being able to work with and illuminate these women who were fighting day in and day out for a dream at that point that they didn't even know if it was going to happen. Flash back to the pandemic. We didn't even know if the Olympics and the Paralympics were going to happen in those early days, but they were putting in the work consistently. And I think that's really kind of what got me up every day.
Wow. And I think that you turn that, you talk about this, the story that happened about your dad and your mum and losing that, but that motivated you to create this new narrative and this new inspiration for you and these new multiple role models, right? Do you have a favorite number of stories out there? Because it would be impossible to ask you one, right?
That is so hard. I feel like whenever I get that question, I'm being asked to choose amongst my unborn children. I will toss out two different stories. The first is of Caster Semenya. So I had the opportunity to work with Caster twice now. Caster is a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, 3-time world champion in the 800 meters. She's from South Africa. Born a woman, identifies as a woman, has no part in the conversation around trans athletes. But she was barred from competing because of her naturally high testosterone levels. And essentially had lost a decade of her life because she has, quote unquote, higher than average testosterone. Again, this is how she was born. She never questioned anything about herself until people started saying, hey, why are you so good? And she's like, I don't know, this is how I was born. So giving voice to Caster during, I think, this period where she felt like the world turned on her was incredibly meaningful for me. The second athlete who I always like to give credit to is Massima Alizadeh. Massima is from Afghanistan. She is the head of the refugee Olympic team. So number one, a lot of people don't know that there is a refugee Olympic team. Some of these athletes, actually all of these athletes, have some of the most incredible stories you will ever hear. They're all from war-torn countries. Massima grew up cycling in Kabul, and she had to dress up as a man in order to get on her bike. And that was because women could not bike ride. And when she went out as a man, she would have a man ride in front of her and a man ride behind her just in case anyone found out. And then when cars would pass her, if anyone looked over and noticed that while she's dressed like a man, it's actually a woman, they would throw stuff at her, they would insult her. And she did this day in and day out because she had a dream of going to the Olympics and competing in the Tour de France. Flash forward to today, Massima is going into her second Olympics. She has competed in the female Tour de France, and she is using her platform to elevate the condition of women in Afghanistan under Taliban rule. So I think that she's an incredible shining light and a beacon of hope for everyone, but in particular, she's trying to leverage that for women in her country.
And it never ceases to amaze me, the individuals who suffer the most or don't have the same advantage as others will be the ones doing more, really, like you say, using that power for good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was on a personal note, it was an incredible reminder of the privilege that I have to be able to hop on a bicycle and walk outside my door and feel completely fine. But incredible how she's leveraging her notoriety, her position of power, really to spread awareness for the situation of women in her home country.
And I know you talk about the fact that you had the opportunity and the gift to talk these individuals, but actually it takes a village. It takes to create an Olympian and a Paralympian.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that people don't see and we try to shed light on is that there's really a village behind every single athlete on the podium, every single athlete who even gets to compete. Katarina Roxon of Canada, she's a para swimmer. She told me when she was on the podium receiving her medal, she was really picturing her family, her friends, her coaches around her on that podium. And of course, on television, we don't see that. But that is often what the athletes are thinking about, is all the individuals who invested in them, who said yes to driving them to practice when they were little, who lifted them up when they had a bad day. Because, it's not all sunshine and rainbows to get to the top of the world. There's a lot of downs along the way too.
Is there a word that you would describe? Is there a common word or theme that you would give to these amazing athletes that you interview?
So the word and the theme through all of the interviews we do is resilience. It's the notion that they are all incredibly resilient individuals, and that can take form in many different ways. It can be recovering from injury. It could be like Massima, being resilient in the face of pressures from her society and continuing to push forward towards her dream. It could be like Castor and being resilient and using her platform to right a wrong that she feels has been an injustice. And we see resilience in all of these women. It just manifests in different ways.
And that's amazing, because this is where your marketing and comms superpower comes in, because you can see that threat and everyone can do something, right? Irrespective of what part they play in this sector industry.
Exactly. And that's really one of our underlying goals, is that you don't even have to be a fan of sports to like our work. We're really trying to show that anyone can find their inner Olympian or their inner Paralympian, because the traits that these women have are traits that transcend sports.
100%. And I think do you feel like we're at a turning point?
I really hope so. I am, all my fingers and all my toes are crossed. We are seeing right now a time when women's sports are having a moment, and we're trying to make that moment happen every single day. We just have to keep the momentum going. But I hope so.
Because there's still that disparity, isn't it, between the representation in the media for sport through male sports versus women's sports. It's getting better. Is it progress, not perfection?
Yeah, no, and thank you for calling that out. So Paris is actually the first Olympics where there's gender equity. So we're actually seeing equal number of male and women athletes competing. At the same time, there's still a lot of work that has to be done. So if you look at the sports media landscape as a whole, we're going to take a step back. 85% of sports media coverage goes to men. So that means that 15% of sports media coverage is all that goes to women. And that's an all-time high. The number historically was between 3 and 5% until a new study came out this past year by Wasserman. So yes, we are making progress, and we can hold that win on one hand. At the same time, I think it's important to have the nuance and the ability to take a step back and say, 15%, we can do a lot better than that.
Hell yeah. And it's also the equity between the Olympics and the Paralympics. I worked at London 2012. So I was working for the London Olympic Organising Committee. And I remember that was the first year that there was there was that parity, if you like, the same destination, the same. And it was definitely very, very, very like a privilege to be at. It was not like an afterthought or a second class show. It was absolutely amazing, but there's still more to be done. I know you have the same belief as me, as it should be done at the same time, right?
That is my personal belief. So of that 15% of coverage going to women, it pretty much all goes to able-bodied individuals. Tokyo, the past Paralympics, was actually the first Paralympics in history that was shown on primetime television. Beyond the actual quantity, there's also a massive quality issue in terms of how these athletes are being covered. So specifically when it comes to para-athletes, there's tropes that journalists and media fall into, frequently portraying para-athletes with what I call the pity brush, being sources of inspiration, whether or not that narrative resonates with the athlete. Some athletes just want to be talked about for being the best bocce player in the world, and they don't want to be they don't want the narrative to really focus on, oh, woe is me, I was born with A, B, and C condition, if that's not really how they feel. So we got a long way to go in terms of quantity, but then also quality.
Now, let me turn the focus on you, because you spend all the time interviewing amazing humans with amazing stories, but you've recently received some accolades, haven't you, for Flamebearers? It's 4 Signal Awards. And equally, you've also received massive recognition at Harvard as well. So, like, two two not too small things there, right?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I like to say that the athletes we work with are doing the hard work, and I'm trying to give them the credit that I think they deserve. We have been very fortunate. We're now up to 18 total awards in video work, podcasting, and social media. We just recently won a number of awards for our work with the U.S. women's national soccer team from 1985. So shout out to my amazing co-host, Michelle Akers, from that series.
It's amazing. And it's amazing. I think people don't always understand the power that amplification, the power of that storytelling. It's not just a podcast or a video or an insight report. It's way more than that. It's more, it's massive.
Exactly. Well, the way we started is you asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I said, I wanted to be on the U.S. women's national soccer team. That's because I had role models. That's because I grew up with a picture and a poster of Mia Hamm on my door. That said, if you can't see it, if you can't hear it, it's hard to be it. So we're trying to provide and illuminate the stories of tons of different role models around the world. So little girls and boys have athletes at the highest echelon of sports who they can aspire to become.
100%. And the Lionesses, our football soccer team over here, we hold way up there. When they won the Euros a couple of years ago, one of the first things that they did was to use that power to go and lobby government to say we need more sport at grassroots level. And I know the US team did a massive role about getting that gender pay parity as well. So that's the important piece, because it's not there, is it? The pay parity is not there and the equity is not there. The US soccer team, I think in the first instance, we were in hand-me-down clothes, I think.
Yes. I had the opportunity to work with Becky Sauerbrunn, who was one of the captains of the U.S. women's national team. She also was leading the charge on that pay equity lawsuit. We were successful in it, so that is incredible. But if we were to flash back to the first U.S. women's national soccer team, 1985, who I had the opportunity to work with, they were wearing hand-me-down men's jerseys that were 5 times too large, and they were given $10 a day. Compare that to what the men's players were given, and it's laughable. But yes, we are making progress.
100%. And what is next for you?
So we have a lot of exciting things. Obviously, the Olympics and the Paralympics just wrapped up, I believe. We have a number of exciting podcast seasons that we have coming up that I can't quite announce yet, as well as some video documentary work all around the goal of centering the stories of diverse women in sports, as well as a number of really exciting events, sharing those voices with young girls and boys directly. One thing that I do like to really name is that we don't do sports reporting. So a lot of times people are like, oh, this is really cool. How are you different from, an ESPN or name any other media outlet? What I like to say to that is we really focus on the person, not the sport. So we produce human interest stories that anyone can relate to. We're not talking about who beat who, what the score of a current match is. We're really talking about the beating heart under the jersey, the woman with the brain attached to her body that is scoring those goals, shooting those baskets.
And interesting, you've talked about the amplification of this, not just to young girls and women, but also to boys. That to me has always been the critical thing.
100%. And that's actually something that I can mention. We're in the process of building out a male athlete allyship program. I think when it comes to equity and gender equity, we can't do it alone. I am a big believer that we need men to be a crucial part of this work. And specifically, I think men in sport have an incredible audience and visibility, and they have a lot of sway culturally. So stay tuned for our work engaging men, because I think that they are half of the solution.
100%. It's not a women's problem to fix. And that's one of the things we've always been adamant and passionate about. Collect the good guys. Collect the good guys. The guys that will advocate for women, for girls, for women's sport, whatever sector it is, when the women aren't in the room. That's the big opportunity to shift, right?
Completely aligned.
We'll do that on the next podcast when we do our follow-up, I reckon. Now, what would be those final words kind of inspiration and advice for young women out there who really want to make an impact, whether it be in the world of media, sport, or the associated communities that wrap round this wonderful world of athleticism and everything else that sits with it?
What I would say is definitely to have a abundance mindset, not a scarcity mindset. I think where many of us, my former self included in this, get it wrong is we think that we're competing with each other. We think that there's only so much room at the top of the pyramid. And I think that's wrong. I have found that when we support each other, when we lift each other up, it comes back to you tenfold. So what I would say is if you're looking to get into this space, surround yourself with women who are already doing the incredible work and become their cheerleaders, become their number one fan, because I think that there's enough for everyone to go around.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's that we kind of live in a whole ecosystem here, which is all about like passing it forward. We've all got something that we can give and gain. This is not, cutting up the pie and people get less. This is about sharing this. So that's what it's all about for us. That's what sits in our heart and DNA. And that's why I'm absolutely convinced that we are separated somewhere down the line.
I totally agree. And I remember when I was younger thinking, oh, what do I have to offer? I don't have a lot of resources, or I don't have A, B, or C. And I think where I was getting it wrong is there's so much that you can offer that isn't monetary. It's skill set based. It could be time based. Look at what you're good at and think how you can use that to support the people around you.
What is your superpower?
Ooh. I make people feel seen and celebrated. I meet people where they're at, and doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what your background is. If people know you or if you're a Joe Schmo on the street, I stop. I make them feel seen.
Seen and celebrated. I love it. And finally, somewhere down the line, I read that you have 3 times applied to be on Survivor. Is that true?
That is true. I'm still waiting on my callback.
Hey, if not now, when, right?
Exactly. This was one of those things that after losing my dad, I was like, we got one shot at this thing called life. What am I waiting for?
I love that. We always talk on this podcast about those tote bag moments. What are those that, be seen and celebrated? That, I believe, is your Jamie Mittelman. That's your tote bag moment for amongst many others. I think there's a whole backside to it as well. But thank you so much for joining me. Literally, we need a box set of this, I feel.
I would love that. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I always love every week these top tips, this insight, the passion, the energy that's just sort of come across the ocean. It's addictive, it's enthusiastic, and it's so brilliant. So thank you so much for giving us the time today, Jamie.
Thank you for having me, and I love what you're doing.
Oh, and thank all of you for listening. Please do give us your comments. We know you love some of the comments that we get. Please share it. Please pass it on. Be seen and be celebrated. It's so massively important. And equally, it's free, right? We can all do something to celebrate someone else. So thank you all so much for joining me on this week's podcast. My name is Simone. This is the We Are Power podcast, and you can stay connected on all of our socials: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, We Are Power_net, Facebook and LinkedIn, We Are Power. Thank you so much, and I will see you next week.